Okay, our focus in this video is to talk about two different types of lines, and I'm actually going to bring in a third type of line. And the first one we're going to talk about, the first concept is parallel lines. Okay, so parallel lines are lines that are a certain distance apart, and they never get closer, and they also never get farther away from each other. So we can use this term to talk about different shapes that we may encounter in the future, and it's important that we know what parallel lines are, because they will describe some of the shapes that we have. So parallel lines are going to look close to this. Now I just have a basically like a little pencil. I don't have a ruler, so my lines might not be perfectly straight, but they should be. Okay, and so I would start with one line. Okay, and here is my line. And so the arrows represent that they go on forever in both directions. They don't ever end. And I'm going to put some points on here so I can name them. That'll be point A, and this will be point B. So we'll call that line AB. And then we would measure out a certain distance from probably from here to here, let's say. And so those lines would remain that certain distance apart, and so these two lines could never cross. So this will be line CD. So for these to be parallel, they will never get closer to each other, and they'll never get farther apart. Okay, so since these two lines appear to do that, we would call these parallel lines, because they never cross, and they never get closer, and they never get farther apart. So that's one type of lines that we'll talk about today. The next type of line, the next set of lines, are a little bit different. So let's talk about those real quick. These lines are called intersecting lines. Now, intersecting lines do cross, but the nice thing about these is that other than crossing, they don't have any other criteria that really describe them. So intersecting lines, let me write that up here. Intersecting. Intersecting lines, those are lines that cross. So let me just draw a couple of examples. This would be, we'll guess, line AB. We'll call that line AB, and just pretend it's straight. So here's point B, and then we're going to draw another line that intersects it. It crosses it. And this will be line CD. Here's point D. So right here in that region, that's where they intersect. Well, that's where those two lines intersect. So this is the portion that makes them intersecting lines. Now, as you can see, as you get towards point A and C, as you're going out this way, these lines get farther apart. If you're coming back in like this, if you're coming this way, these lines are getting closer together. and so they could not be called parallel lines. That's why they are called intersecting lines. Basically, if lines are not parallel, at some point they will cross, and we would actually call this point where they cross, this would actually be a point that we would label, so we'll label it point E. So those are two types of lines we've learned before now, parallel lines and intersecting lines. Now there's something else that's important to intersecting lines. There is a certain type of intersecting lines, and these are going to help us describe some shapes. So let's take a look at what those are. So we have intersecting lines, and this type of intersecting lines is actually going to be called perpendicular lines. So perpendicular lines are intersecting lines, but there's something special about them. Intersecting lines are lines that cross. Oops. Well, I guess let's. There we go. That's nice. Let me do this. I'll rewrite it. Perpendicular lines. So these are lines that cross, but there's something special about them. So these lines would cross, but they form 4 right angles. Okay? So when these lines cross, and I know these lines are not perfectly straight, but they're very close. And so that forms one right angle, and then you'll see another right angle right here, and right here. And so when two lines form 4 right angles, they're considered perpendicular. And so here is my 90 degrees. And so we'll find perpendicular lines or perpendicular line segments in shapes like squares or rectangles, and so that's why it's important to know what perpendicular lines are, because they help us describe different shapes. If you think of a rectangle, here's my rectangle. Once again, not perfect, but if you imagined that these line segments went on forever, at this point, it would form 4 right angles right here. So that's why it's important that we know what perpendicular lines are and why they they are intersecting, but it's important that we know the difference between intersecting lines and perpendicular lines. Also, it's important we can use this example here. These lines, this line here and this line up here, these two lines are considered parallel because they will never cross in a rectangle. These are parallel right here as well. And a rectangle is described as having 2 sets of parallel lines, and you can see that here. So it's important that we know what types of lines that we have in our shapes. So hopefully this helps you understand the types of lines. Hopefully you can describe them, and this will help you with your assignment in describing shapes.